Hi, my name is Dr. Jacqui Mack-Harris. I am one of the co-hosts of New Life Live Radio, and today I'm going to talk about addiction in families. And I'm going to start with me, share a little bit about my own background, my own family story, and hopefully give you a few pointers on how to make some changes in your own family. I grew up with my mom and my stepdad, and I have a little brother and a little sister, and we are pretty spread apart. So I am what we would call a parentified child. Growing up, though, I was just the oldest kid, and I was the kid with the responsibility to take care of the other kids. And I had to be in that position because my dad is an alcoholic. And as I was growing up, we'd have great times during the week, and then the weekend would come and they would get drunk and he would get angry and he would get violent, and then the weekdays would come and things would be great again. And he did not believe that he was an alcoholic because he only drank on the weekends. And I remember my mom saying, "It's the alcohol. This just isn't him. It's the alcohol." So that was important because it was confusing to us of how she could stay in this relationship with this person who we all thought was so awful. She had known him for so long, and she had other memories of him from their childhood, and she could see the good in him when I couldn't. And I, being a kid, was just feeling like why so much responsibility was being put on me when these were all roles that they should be taking on as parents. Growing up, I learned that I would need to do things for myself because I couldn't trust the adults in my life to do things for me. And that was one of the effects of having addiction in our family, because my mom was so busy dealing with the emotions and the battles with my dad and the alcohol, and my dad was busy dealing with the battle of fighting with her because he really didn't think he had a problem. He felt like she was the problem, that they didn't have time or energy to focus on us as the children. So that was my job, to make sure that children were okay. When my dad finally got sober, it was because everybody was gone. My mom and my brother moved away. I had gone to the military, so I'd moved away. My sister had moved to another state, and she was a teenager still, but she had moved out, and so he was home alone. And I remember him telling me that that was his bottom. He had hit the place where he was all alone, and I think that that was his greatest fear, was to be alone. And so he started a recovery program. That would be about 34 years ago now. And in his recovery program, he had to make amends. He had to figure out what was emotionally going on underneath all of the cover-up of alcohol. He had to figure out what emotions were driving it. So what was going on emotionally that was propelling him towards addiction. And as he went through that process, the rest of the family was in a healing process as well. And so what I learned through my own recovery is that I had taken on some things in my life that had become almost character traits because of being this parentified adult, because of the addiction. It made me feel like I was the one who was responsible for everyone. I was responsible for my siblings. If anything happened to my parents, I was the one that needed to take care of it. And this translated in my life to being a workaholic, to being the person who is always feeling overwhelmed by other people's emotions because everybody would come to me with their things. And eventually over time, I learned to turn all that emotion off. And so I got to the place where I was emotionally avoidant. And that made me feel safe. That made me feel strong. That protected me. I basically armored up, and I put a wall around me to keep me from getting hurt. I just didn't care enough to care, and that way nobody could hurt me. And that came out of just being disappointed so often as a child, having an expectation of parents and then having the parents not meet those expectations was devastating, and it made me feel so unsafe that I eventually had to learn how to not feel my feelings but I also learned how to not feel other people's feelings. That's really kind of how I was able to stay in relationship with my family. Me and my mom and my dad, we get along great. We travel together. My husband would say that my dad is his best friend. We are super close, not to the point of enmeshment where we don't have our own lives now, but we are super close. And I think that we were able to stay in relationship through all of the difficulties of alcoholism because I was avoidant, because I learned to turn off my emotions so that I didn't get hurt. Because when people hurt me, I had a tendency to cut them off completely. This also comes out of growing up in a family of addiction. Because I was in this family I couldn't get away from, I will not tolerate that from anyone outside of the family. So I've had people in my life who have hurt me or I felt betrayed by, and I was always so quick to, I'm done, just cut them off, as a way of protecting myself. Because growing up, when people hurt me, I had to be in that relationship because it was my home, it was my house. I couldn't get away. I told myself as an adult, that would not be the case. I would not be around people who would hurt me. And so that impacted me in that I don't have old friendships. I don't have long-standing, long-term relationships from my youth because I would cut people off because it just hurt too much to be in relationship with them. One of the ways in which I overcame that was to do my own work around addiction and addiction recovery. I had to learn why I would cut off, why I would shut down. It was self-protective. That armor made me feel as though I was safe, made me feel as though I would be okay. The problem is it still didn't get me what I wanted, which was connection and attachment and intimacy in relationship. And so I've had to do my own work to be able to overcome the barriers that I will put up as an emotional avoider to having a fulfilling, intimate relationship. I've had to go through my own recovery and really take a look at what am I avoiding? What am I trying to get away from? And when have I felt this way before? What are the feelings that are coming up in this situation? And where am I experiencing these feelings in my body? And why am I experiencing them? What happens when I experience them? And the more that I've done that, the better able I have been to name what's happening and to assign the meaning to it that is true and not just a trigger from my childhood, because I can look back now and go, oh, I remember feeling this when. And then I can ask myself, is this what I'm experiencing now, the exact same thing, or is this something different? And that brings me into the present moment. Because one of the problems for emotional avoiders is that they aren't often present in the moment because they are shut down and tuned out in order to protect themselves. I learned that that self-protective mechanism that I was using for all those years that was a great survival tool was stopping me from getting what I really wanted in my relationships in the present time. So now I can name what's going on, and then I can take a risk and ask for my need to be met. And when you grow up in a family of addiction, you don't want to take risks and you don't want to ask for a need to be met. And it was in recovery that I learned how to do that. I learned how to put my needs out to the person who says they love me and are in relationship with me, and to wait for their response. And most of the time, that need is met. Most of the time, my husband, my mother, my sibling, they're able to meet that need. And when they can't, we can have a conversation about it. It's not just a complete cutoff anymore. I can tolerate their truth as well as I can share my own. And so I hope that those of you who may be dealing with addiction, having addiction in the family, when you hear this, that you feel encouraged that there is help available. Even if you are not the person with the addiction, there is help available for you as a family member. There's still recovery to be had for you, and it can be life-changing and help you get to the place where you're having the kind of relationships you want to have because you're able to show up emotionally and be present and manage some of your past triggers.